An FBI operation to help bring underage sex trafficking victims back home is finished, taking more than 120 traffickers off the streets. 9 of those were right here in Lubbock.
Texas is second in the nation for reported human trafficking cases.
Epidemic not only across the nation, but even right here in Lubbock.
But we're seeing it right here in the South Plains, and it doesn't stop at age or gender. If you know someone who may need to reach out for help, encourage them to contact the Rape Crisis Center.
Sex trafficking in West Texas.
Human trafficking
is becoming more and more prevalent.
On the South Plains,
it's difficult to imagine.
Most people we talk to in Lubbock and the surrounding area, when we talk to them about sex trafficking, their response is that really an issue in our area?
Many Texans still believe that this is an issue that happens in other countries, or only happens to immigrants, or they conflate trafficking with smuggling, and they're not identifying what's right before their eyes.
I mean, we have an idea of what survivors look like, or people who are being trafficked, what they look like in our head. They can look like us.
It doesn't have a preference for city or rural. It's all over Texas.
Children, male, female, and it's from all socioeconomic backgrounds.
As long as there's a demand, people will find vulnerable people to exploit and manipulate, to use in sex trafficking.
Since 2012, we have seen 262 victims of sex trafficking, and every year we see that number increase.
Sex trafficking is an issue here in Lubbock. It's something that can be very private and very quiet, and especially something that involves the internet. It's very hard to track in that regard.
We find that trafficking most often happens through online spaces, and that can be through Backpage, through Facebook, through any kind of social media websites, as well as websites that are specific to the sex industry. We also see a huge level of victims who have been forced to engage in some kind of pornography. At some point or another, their trafficker took pictures and videos that then were sold to an online pornography distributor. And so at this point now, it becomes not something just local, but global.
So it's not the stranger taking you off the street and moving you 500 miles away. While that can happen, it's very, very rare.
Most of the cases we see and that we hear about and that we work on with our law enforcement partners and our service provider partners are instances where there may not be any physical chains or a physical taking, but there's a psychological chain.
A person is so degraded that they get to where they're just surviving. And when you have a person who's just surviving, they can be manipulated very easily.
Because they're a victim, and that's molded who they are, and that's what they've had to do to survive.
Many of them are being victimized by people that they know and love and trust, unfortunately.
And at the time, I didn't realize that's what was happening to me. I just realized that it was unsafe. I felt nasty, I felt dirty, but my mom said do it. It was survival. The lights are going to be cut off. We don't have food. We need to get clothing. So you need to go and get with so-and-so and don't come back until you have this.
A person is having to trade sex in order to get their basic needs met, right? And so in that case, the person who is giving them that shower or food in exchange for sex is the exploiter.
No, it's not that I'm demeaning myself because I just really want to. I'm a product of my environment. That is absolutely a true statement.
You have to ask yourself why, where did that come from? That it's not just a decision that someone made. Someone was put into that position.
So many of our victims are being detained as juvenile delinquents or being arrested as prostitutes because we don't understand the trauma that these people have been through, and we see them as perpetrators rather than victims.
But a lot of times what people don't understand is it never starts when they're arrested. It always starts a long time before, maybe 10 years before, when they were a little girl or a little boy.
And so if people are treating us in a way that's unloving, unhealthy, in a way that our only value is to get someone something, we start to believe that that's what we're here for.
A trafficking victim in a crisis mode is going to need immediate intervention. That's going to include work with our advocates so we can get them into a safe place in an emergency shelter. They need to see a physician right away to make sure that they're medical needs are being met.
When we conduct our examination, we discover that a lot of times they have physical injuries that have never been addressed before.
It's a lot more difficult than just a basic, we get a report and you follow through with it. It's got many different facets to it.
A lot of them that have come to us have been addicted to some sort of substance, and so that makes it so much harder, because it's like, okay, well, what do we deal with first? The drugs? Do we deal with, the trauma? Do we deal with abuse? What do we deal with?
But then once you do see it and you understand what it is, what then? What's next? And that's always where these gaps come in.
They want to get out, but they don't know how to get out.
This is a lot of trauma and crisis and things that really require a lot of time. Short-term counseling doesn't really work here.
It is a long process. It takes these women years to recover from the trauma that they've experienced.
When it comes to victims of trafficking, there are very few opportunities for them to get into long-term housing, especially transitional housing.
So homelessness is a huge problem. I mean, it is probably the #1 risk factor for trafficking.
So to take someone that their job was their body, take them away from that and have to impart in them new set of skills and a whole new paradigm shift and say, oh, in 30 days, we won't have any more beds. That's not a realistic approach to healing and rehabilitation or restoration.
If people don't have a place to find stability, safety, security, then rebuilding and addressing other parts of their situation is virtually impossible.
And so having a place that understands trauma and treats these survivors with the respect that they deserve and meets them where they are is huge. That's huge. We need so many places like that around the state. So to have one in Lubbock is a big deal, and we need a lot more.
For us at Open Door, we are really passionate about partnering with other community partners, that we don't need to do the same things other people are doing. Our program can be for people who need a space between 6 months all the way up to 18 months. And so that way people, again, can heal at their own pace. Our niche is really going to be trying to help provide opportunity for that long-term healing.
For them to gain the stability to get out of trafficking and then begin to live in permanent housing on their own.
With our survivor housing program, we're going to be able to provide 20 units of housing for survivors and for their children. We will have this open to both men and women, because we see all kinds of people who have been stuck in trafficking and just don't have the resources or connections to be able to make it out. Survivor housing serves our entire region, which is made up of 15 counties, and this is really important because we see trafficking happening often in rural communities who lack the resources to really be able to address the need of survivors.
What we're doing with the entire program is showing people, not telling people, but showing them that we're all built with the need to connect. We need other people just to get through life.
We have survivor leaders on staff that are going to be using their story in a positive way to connect with people, so that we know that we're not doing this alone.
Housing, food, clothing, access to medical care, access to child care, and even things like parenting classes to be able to sustain their progress is really difficult. And that's what's really cool about survivor housing, is that that's something that's happening within the program. That's the way the program is set up, is to give them a safe place and to give them people that they can learn how to trust.
We want to meet people where they're at. We want to walk alongside them. We want to hear what their dreams, what their goals are, what healing looks like for them.